I can hear you.
Okay,
Wonderful.
finally. I don't know why I have trouble with the computer, but not on my phone.
Right? It
So,
happens. All right, so it is being recorded right now. Now we got you. We got you, Alex.
okay.
Okay, so you wanted to talk about some topics. Did you want to talk about the Alex Rittenhouse today?
Which account? Sorry.
Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yes.
So what is your thoughts on that? Have you seen the video?
Well, it bothered. Yeah, I saw the video. It's very disturbing, but the whole situation that you guys are facing down in the States is terribly disturbing. But it bothers me that such a young person, he's only 17 years old, he's barely a teenager, and he's carrying an assault rifle, and on top of that, he's involved in all this violence. And I believe he came from out of state to fight for some right-wing group to defend their property.
Yeah.
But
you said he's barely a teenager. Do you mean he's barely an adult?
sorry, I meant barely an adult. And
okay.
I think I said he's barely into a teenager. But anyway, he's barely an adult. And as far as I'm concerned, he should a boy that age should be there, and he shouldn't be carrying a gun.
Yeah.
But that being said, he's there, and I watched the video, and it's tragic. But if they try to prosecute him and charge him with first-degree murder or any kind of assault charge, they're going to lose. It was basically self-defense. He was being pursued, and
I think they're pursuing him because he had a gun on him. But it's like that just causes issues. You don't go after someone with a gun unless he's people have a right to have a gun, and unfortunately, that's just the case in the United States. But you don't go chasing after him, and people will be like, "Well, they're peaceful protesters." No, they're not. They will chase you down. Like they chase down in Portland. They chase down anyone who they consider a Nazi or a white supremacist. They will run you out of the city. That's what they do.
I think that was the case. They thought they looked upon him as a white supremacist, a Trump supporter, whatever you want to call it. But as far as the words peaceful protest, that should be totally taken out of the entire vocabulary of what's going on in the United States. It's not a peaceful protest. As far as I'm concerned, it's almost the beginnings of a civil war. It's like Fort Sumter being bombed. You have cities. What I find interesting is in the United States right now, you have cities being burned, people being killed, shops being looted, businesses being ransacked. Yet you have two parties that dilly-dally. They argue over semantics. They argue over rights and wrongs, and they blame each other as the house is burning, but no one's putting out the fire. And
what is the fire?
Yeah, and I'm beginning to wonder, is the American empire beginning to collapse? Like the Roman Empire, it slowly collapsed from within. Well, it's the same thing here. It's slowly collapsing from within.
I would say that Rome fell kind of because of multiple events, also because the Gothics were also invading the barbarians. But you did have a lot of things going on in the inside that just greatly destroyed the empire from within.
America is the same as any empire. It's stretched its military as far as it can go. It's indebted itself up to the beyond any possibility of ever paying that debt back. So it's devaluing the dollar. I could see in the near future that the American currency will be no longer the main financial staple. It'll maybe the Chinese yen or the European euro will take that over. And if that happens, the American dollar is going to become a worthless piece of paper. But that's for the future. For me, I just see a extreme leftist organizations incoherently raging in your cities, and I don't see any end to it.
Yeah, and you can also point to like other examples where the currency, like the German mark back in like the 1930s, became so worthless that people could have like a fucking barrel full of German marks and they couldn't even probably afford a bread loaf because it was just so useless back then. And people can talk about like how bad Hitler was and how bad fascism is. When people think fascism, they think of fucking Hitler, and it's like that's just one side of fascism, and that's, you could probably argue that wasn't even fascism, at least not compared to the Italian fascism of the 1920s and 30s, where Mussolini had argued for a call for fascism with the Fascist Manifesto, which was greatly considered progressive for its time, and would probably, if you were to rewrite it and just say like I'm not saying anyone should, but like the Black Lives Matter manifesto, and just re-put those things there, but fit to the Black Lives Matter narrative, people will be like, this is progressive. This is exactly what we want. And it's like, it's not. It's, I mean, these people endorse fascism themselves. I've met so many people on Facebook who are just like, if you support Kyle Rittenhouse, then unfriend me. It's like, why? Because we disagree with you? I've had people block me because of recently because I just sit there and disagree with them. It's like, well, you're just not into reasoning. You're just illogical. It's like, why? Because I disagree with you. They have this emotional knee-jerk reaction to think that they are automatically correct. And it's like, you're not automatically correct. It's debatable. And we should honestly, like, I have my views on what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse, but we should still wait for the verdict from all evidence presented. And from the way it looks, he's not going to get prosecuted because he was self-defending himself. He even went to the police with his hands up. And it's not because he has white privilege. The guy apparently is Hispanic, so I hear. No idea how true that is, but he went up to the police with his hands up, which means, to me, it tells me he is likely innocent and was self-defending himself, which he was.
Well, like any revolution, the enemy is the enemy no matter what they do. And they throw words around like white supremacist and white privilege and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
We're the enemy, and that's the way it's looking, unless you follow the leftist tropes.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that there is no reason. Again, that's another word that's been lost in translation. There's just reaction and feelings. And that's what's driving a lot of these groups. Now you have a march, I believe, to Washington, essentially to celebrate and to also protest, because today is the 57th anniversary of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. Martin Luther King would be rolling in his grave probably at what's going on in the United States. There's no desire for peace. There's just a want for revenge.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that they're fighting a quote-unquote revolution. Thomas Paine even summed this up perfectly. Like, revolutions are not this inherently innocuous event. They can destroy an entire society. So your intentions might be good, but it's like, it's very nuanced, and their revolution could end up destroying America and preventing an actual society from flourishing. Like, it's kind of like defund the police or abolish the police. Instead of abolishing and defunding, fix what the problem is. Like, I don't know, maybe more checks and balances, give more rights to the people. Don't make it to where like a cop, if you just like, slap them on the back like, hey, that's very funny, they can take that as assault and arrest you because that's what they can do. Judges and cops have way too much power, and instead of defunding them, just like, I don't know, just like look at what the issue is and solve that issue. I look at like,
In 1969, we had something similar happen in Montreal, where the police went on strike, and it only took 2 hours, and Montreal fell into chaos, and they had to call in the RCMP and the provincial police to quell the violence.
Mm-hmm.
Just no understanding what defunding the police, or in some cities just outright getting rid of the police, what this is actually going to do. If you believe that citizens, and I don't, are going to live in some kind of peace and tranquility, it isn't going to happen. Now, it's interesting too with this revolution, if you want, let's call it that for whatever word you want to use. It's interesting that when George Floyd was killed, there were marches all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
As this revolution or as this movement continued to gain momentum in the United States, it got lesser and lesser worldwide. And I think the world's now looked upon this as this has gone too far. It's no longer making sense. It's no longer about justice. It's about just raw violence.
Yeah, it's destruction. That's all they care. They want to rot the danger that is going to be their own destruction.
What concerns me too about the Black Lives Matter is that they refuse to look at evidence. They refuse to look at within their own communities at why blacks don't succeed as well in society because of family issues, educational dropouts, crime. There's a whole slew of reasons.
They just blame it on racism, and it's like,
well, yeah, that's it.
If you look at it broadly speaking, sure, you can assume it's racism, but when you look at the specifics, you just covered it's a lot more complex. It's like economics, it's poverty, you have education, you have the culture within the Black community too, who I'm sure is dangerous at times or toxic.
Yeah. I'm 66 years old, so I saw the civil rights marches and what have you, yeah. and you can't tell me that the racism back then, I'm a 50s, 60s child, you can't tell me that the racism back then is just as bad as it is now. Yeah. I mean, the idea of a black president, you would have been laughed at.
Yeah, and black people were sprayed with water hoses back then. Like, it was completely different. Dogs, water hoses, segregation, or Jim Crow. You had cops just beating the shit out of black people for being black. No one's being beaten because or shot or killed because they're black now. It's like, who's that one guy who just recently got shot and killed while going to his car? People like to be like, well, see, this it's because he's black. It's like, no, it's not because he's black. He went to his car. He was told, hey, stop. There was a reason, and I want to see the body cam footage of why they even proceeded to go after him. But nonetheless, they went after him, and they're like, hey, stop. We wanted to talk to you or detain you. And he was like, fuck off, basically, and went to his car. And then he reached in, doing something, and that's dangerous. It's like, people can be like, well, Kyle Rittenhouse had a fucking gun on him and he didn't get shot. It's like, it's the context of what happened. Yes, if you just look at them very broadly, Kyle Rittenhouse looks like he was treated different because he was white, I guess, if you want to be intellectually dishonest. But the difference is, when he came to the place, he surrendered. He was like, I surrender. Like, I'm not going to fight this. And that's probably the smartest thing he could have done, because now he has a good case against him, and people are trying to accuse him for intentional murder. And it's like, you're not going to prove that. You're not going to prove that. It's the same thing like why journalists like myself cannot call Trump a racist. We cannot prove his intention. You can't prove intention almost always or ever. So how are you going to prove that Kyle Rittenhouse intentionally went to manslaughter someone? To me, it wasn't premeditated. It was, oh shit, I'm being attacked. I have a gun. Get the fuck away from me. And he shot. He was probably the same way like with cops. He felt scared. He probably didn't know what was going to happen. And one of those fuckers had a gun on him. He had a pistol. And people like, for all we have to know, what did Kyle see? What did Kyle see that made him react the way he reacted? Because everyone was chasing him, saying, get his ass. And it's like, these protesters, I've been to all these protests in Portland almost, and they chase people down. They will mob chase you. They will bum rush you. I've seen them march through the streets. And Gregory McKelvey, who's like, well, I'm the only one leading peaceful protests, but his protests are always violent. I've seen them go up to trash cans, and regardless if he incited them or not, I've seen people light garbage cans on fires and roll them out into the streets. I've seen them smash buildings. I've seen them smash glass. Like, these people are not sane. They're not reacting with logic or rationale. They are completely having knee-jerk reactions based entirely off of emotions, and that's not how you want to do it. It's like, if there's issues with blacks being treated differently, fine, but learn to solve it differently than spray painting kill cops, not pigs, or kill fascists, or faggots kill fascists, or whatever they want to spray paint in Portland, because I've seen it all. I have plenty of evidence showing this in my booklet that I'm going to have published, Masks On, Rights Off. I have photos of showing what these protesters have done. And I'll be honest, there's one that was spray painted that said kill cops. It was spray painted over one that said kill Antifa. And I don't agree with violence on either side, but these people are not sane. They're not peaceful protesters. if you're peaceful, you like Martin Luther King. I don't like Martin Luther King. He was kind of a dick. He plagiarized his thesis. He was an adulterer. He was a liar. He was not a saint. And it's like, if you wanna look up to someone, fine, but don't like. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I
Be
guess it's just,
careful. Be
huh?
careful with the cancel culture because that's another story. Jacob Blake, the
That's his
gentleman,
name.
the man that was shot in the back. I watched the video and I was surprised that he broke away from the police and he ran to his car.
Yeah. Well, he didn't. He walked, but yeah, he went towards his car,
You
and
just don't
it's
do that.
yeah, you don't do that. And it's like, well, what about Kyle? Is it because he's white? It's like, no, he wasn't running from the cops and then going into something where they think you could be pulling something out. They can see Kyle has a gun, and Kyle didn't like fucking flaunt his gun around. He just happened to have it strapped around him. Whereas,
No,
what's the guy's name again?
Jacob Blake.
Jacob Blake ignored the police, went to his car, and it looked like he was pulling something out. Whether or not he was is completely irrelevant. We haven't seen the body cam footage, at least I haven't, so we don't know what happened. I
Well,
posted
my
on Facebook
understanding,
the
yeah,
footage of George Floyd, and you come to find out George Floyd wasn't just targeted because he's black. He was targeted because he had a counterfeit bill. He was resisting police cooperation, and then eventually resisting arrest. You know, he's like, "Oh, I can't fucking walk," and they kept saying, "Like, dude, walk, just fucking walk, just walk to the car. We will fix the cuff for you." And he kept complaining. And I get he's having an anxiety attack, but the guy was also on drugs too, and he had probably enough to kill most people. I don't know, but I've heard mixed stories. But he had a
well,
heart problem.
that's therein lies the problem. The stories you're hearing, you're not hearing the truth. I mean,
Yeah,
Jacob.
they're all over the place.
I served in the military, and I'm thinking of these police officers as I'm thinking about me, if I was ever in a wartime situation, or any kind of dangerous situation. You don't have time to think. You have to react. And these police officers, they go to a situation where there could be violence. I know the police were called, and there was some violence, as I understand it.
Hmm.
So
I haven't really looked into the Jason
when
Blake.
when a person goes to his car and he's being told to stop, and the police lose sight of what he's doing, it becomes a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, it
But
can be. Yeah.
nobody wants to investigate the whys and the wherefores to any of these things that have happened, but they just want to just accuse and use these accusations as excuses to burn and terrorize communities.
Yep.
And I think people are getting tired of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
And
they have like people can say what they want, but it's like I've even posted on my Facebook about that bitch calling for looting is fine because it's reparations. It's like reparations for what? Well, systemic racism. Bitch, you have just as much the free ability to become successful as I do. There's nothing holding you back. Systemic racism to me has to mean that there's something in the system preventing you. Like people talk about, like I've seen these cartoon illustrations where it shows like a track and it shows like a cis heterosexual white male with his track getting ready to race the black person. The black person has all these obstacles in front of them. There's no obstacles that I can think of that I have seen that are actual obstacles preventing someone from doing something because they're black. And if you want to do that, I can name obstacles that are preventing people from doing stuff because they're white or straight or heterosexual or whatever. It's like, or cis. And it's like, there's a lot of like nuance to this, and they don't care about the evidence. They were like, oh, Jacob Blake or Jason Blake, what was his name?
Jacob Blake.
Jacob Blake, Jason, whatever. Mr. Blake, people think like, oh, he was murdered. How was he murdered? He went to his car. If you don't want trouble with the police, just cooperate. If they are abusive, take that to court. Get a good lawyer or learn to argue for yourself. But don't fucking like when you like. I see it mostly with black people being more disrespectful towards cops, and I think it's because they've had the quote unquote talk, and it's just like you have to listen to the police. Like George Floyd's friend's black, and he listened to the police. Nothing happened to him. And then George Floyd is, making a big deal. I don't want to go back to prison. He was a shit fuck asshole anyways. He pointed a gun at a pregnant woman's belly. He was not a good person. He's not a saint. Fuck him. I'm not saying he should have died, but it's like at the same time, he was not a good person. Neither were these people that Kyle Rittenhouse shot. One of them was a kid fucker. And that disgusts me. Like, like I have my sympathy for certain people, but when you go out and you actually act on those urges, and then you act like you're a saint and you start holding a gun, like the guy who got his bicep ripped off probably deserved it.
Well,
I'm getting really emotional. I should probably calm down.
yes, going back to the argument that people are looting and they have a right to. Nobody has a right to steal, and
Yeah.
it's a very infantile argument to say that it's because of the way they were treated. I worked in mental health for many years, and I heard that from a lot of people. It's because of there comes a time when you got to stand up as an adult and ask yourself, why is this happening to me? I mean, like I said, I go back to the black community and their arguments about racism and what have you. They don't look at things like high school dropout, fatherless homes, which is probably the worst. I mean, in the 1960s, I think only 25% of black families had fatherless homes. Now it's something like close to 80 or even 85% are fatherless homes.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And they'll say that's systemic racism, though.
Yeah, the gangster culture. It's just a whole slew of problems that the community has to look at. I mean, Asian communities, and when I say Asian, I talk like Hindu, Sikh,
like Indians, Bangladeshians, like people,
Japan.
like not just like the classical Asian look.
They're doing very well in communities within the United States and Canada too, and they also too have experienced racism. And I'm not stating that racism and discrimination did not exist. It did.
Right.
And you're never going to erase it. And that's the other thing. These groups want the leftists, and I don't mean just Black Lives Matter. I mean the whole leftist argument. Let's end racism. You're never going to end it. You're never going to end discrimination. It's part of the unfortunate human condition. But you can only learn from the past and look to the future. And eventually, well, I'll give you a little statistic. In the 1960s, something like 13% of whites polled accepted mixed marriages, black, white. Now, 87% say it's fine. Again, you can't tell me it's worse now than it was back in the 50s and the 60s and going even further back. It's getting better.
Yeah.
But a lot of these groups want to live in the past because it gives them the delusion that I'm failing because of.
Yeah, they want to shift the blame onto other people. It's very similar, reminiscent of the Kyle Rittenhouse. Like, oh, he was out there with a gun. It's his fault. Like that bar guy I told you about. He was victim blaming the guy who was self-defending himself. And it's like, you just can't accept your own plight. Like sometimes the plight comes from yourself. Look at the trans community. I mean, there's such high suicide rates. And why is people will be like, it's because of discrimination. No, it's because you don't fucking pass. And society does not want to accept someone who looks like a linebacker as being a woman. And that's their choice. Whether I agree with it or not is completely different. But just because society doesn't accept you does not mean you need to go off yourself. Just maybe it's not the best thing to transition. And it's like sometimes
I think the trans argument is still fresh. It's still new. There's still a lot of things we do not know. I mean, does transgenderism fall in the category of depression? Because 40% of trans who actually do go through the transitional phase end up depressed, and some commit suicide. So
I can probably explain why that is too. And it's not because of transphobia. It's simply because, like, imagine, like, have you seen what Matt looks like?
No.
Okay. Do you know who Tom Cruise, I guess?
Yes.
Okay, imagine Tom Cruise who just came out as a woman. He's just like, or I guess she, excuse me. Tom Cruise is now a woman called Tanisha Cruz. And it's like, Tom Cruise would not pass as a woman. And I'm not saying like your validity of being trans is dependent on passing. It's not. But if you get the surgery and you still look like a linebacker from an American football team, like is it any wonder that like the surgery is not going to alleviate that? It's not going to alleviate it. It's some people just don't pass, and most people do not pass. I live in a city where everyone and their mother has to be transgender or non-binary, and it's like, okay, fine, but I'm a little skeptical. But a lot of them do, like trans men that look just like young boys or girls. You can tell the difference. Like you can spot them. It's called clocking, and you can tell right away. I was interviewing a story. I was doing a story about Jason Washington, who was shot and killed by campus police at Portland State University. He had a gun that he waved around, by the way. I even proved this by not editing badly and nefariously, but I edited the photo so you can actually see the quality because it was really dark and hazy. So I cleared it up with Photoshop, and he has a gun in his hand. He got the gun from his friend because his friend got in a fight with these other people because they called him a nigger. Oops, I just said the N-word. But anyways, it's like I talked to this trans person who was they look like you basically. They don't look anything like they were trying to transition.
Right.
And I get that it's probably because they were homeless, and they were. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. I'll give you that. But do you realize why no one's going to accept you as being a woman? You can get the surgery and be homeless and still not look like a woman. It doesn't matter if you have a neo vagina or breast implants, because if you still look like a guy, people are going to assume you're a guy. It's just how it is. And I wish everyone could pass and be happy with their gender, but it's just not possible. And it's the same thing with like the Black community. Like they have internal problems, and they have to shift the blame on everyone else. Like the trans community blames everyone about the suicide rate because of transphobia. It's not transphobia. It's a biological component. You do not look like a woman. You don't sound like a woman. There's this trans woman who used to work at Target, walks like a freaking guy, and has this huge gut, like a man gut, like a beer gut too.
Yeah.
And the only difference is they talk like this. Hi guys, I'm Trisha. It's like, okay, fine. You want to call yourself a woman? Call yourself a woman. I don't really care personally, but don't complain about transphobia whenever it's like someone doesn't want to accept your fucking gender identity, because no one has to accept your stupid identity. No one has to accept I'm trans. They can think I'm a male. The only thing I ask for is respect my name because I changed my name legally. But it's like, it's with the Black community, they don't look in, like you said, they don't look into themselves, and that's a huge component of what's causing their plight. Is they like to shift the blame on everyone. They can't be racist, they can't be bigoted, they can't even really be prejudiced. They have no power, which is bullshit. They have no privilege, which is, I can disprove that claim in an instant. um, it's like they just want to blame everything on white people, on colonialism. It's like blaming like the plight of Native Americans, who are usually just, fucking, I don't know what to say about Native Americans, but people like to blame white people and colonialism. It's like, we're not the ones who started colonialism. We also came to this country. We decided to take it. That's just the way humans are. It has nothing to do because we're white. And these people just, they want to shift the blame on everyone and everything. And it's like they cannot accept responsibility for their own actions. Just like with Kyle Rittenhouse. It's not anyone's fault but Kyle because he brought a gun. Like that bar guy. He started shifting the blame onto Kyle because Kyle brought a fucking unconcealed rifle. It's like, who cares? He has a right to carry a gun. The right of the bearer shall not be infringed upon. I don't care how old he is. He has the right to carry a gun. If I can carry a gun, he should be able to carry a gun. I don't care how old he is. It's like, whatever. He's 17. He's almost 18. I don't really care. If he was like 12 years old, I'd be like, okay, why is he carrying a gun without a parent by his side? But he was 17. And it's like, he's not the smartest person, but like he has the right to carry a gun, and he's defended himself aptly.
I don't know the laws. I don't know the laws in the states as far as carrying guns, but in Canada, it's pretty hard to get a gun. But
Yeah.
it's I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking as you're talking, you live, and as I do in Canada, or we live in countries that are the freest countries on the planet, and though it's still a new thing, we're working on trying to come to terms with the trans movement, the gay movement, whatever. The fact is we're accepting that these elements in our society exist.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to work with them, and yet we or not we, but we have a
Uh-oh. You froze and you also went quiet. Oh, wait. There we go.
Yeah, we have a segment of the population that just does not see this, and they want the changes right away, and they want unlimited freedom. And the fact is, there's no such thing as unlimited freedom. And for the anarchists who believe they don't want to have a state or a government, I should say, human beings have have a need for hierarchy, and they will create that hierarchy. I worked in a feminist collective, and that was an experience I wouldn't wish on anybody. But that being said, it was supposed to work on a collective anarchist model. Well, it didn't. They were a group of women who called the shots, and they were the ones who had the power, and we gave them that power.
Yeah. I told you about the Lgbt Alliance, right?
Yes.
Yeah. They want the Lgbt Alliance still, even in the U.S., which I think is technically illegal, to be not just. They want to be lesbian led, and it's like, okay, like I support the Lgbt Alliance in certain endeavors, but when you're talking about like only lesbians should lead, it's like not just women, not just anyone, but they have to be fucking homosexual women. Like, why? What is the point of that? Well, women have always been erased from history. It's like, fuck off. No, you haven't. Okay, like there have been some erasure points, but there have been erasure points for everyone. For trans people, for black people, for white people, for lesbians, for bisexuals. Everyone's been erased by other people. It just happens. People ignore the facts. No one reads history. Those who do not read history are doomed to repeat it. And I think that's going to happen. Like you mentioned on Facebook, the fall of the American Empire. And I think that may actually happen because of the way we just ignore history. We tear down history. We don't want to focus on it. People want to talk about I was actually on Facebook today, and someone was like, instead of arguing that you have no white privilege, just accept you have white privilege and just use that privilege for good to make a positive impact. I'm like, fuck you. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, white privilege? If there's white privilege, there's privilege for everything. I can call out many instances where there are black people who have privileges for simply being black, for being gay. I have privileges for simply being trans. That's sad. The fact that, like, cisgender, like, you have probably less advantages than I do in certain areas because you're not trans or you're not black. And I'm like, instead of having that discussion, demanding people accept your belief that white privilege exists, have a discussion with them. Have a debate.
What the whole left movement is going to do, it's going to collapse in on itself because of intersectionality. And I don't see any positive in that. And the fight will just go on. And even if like, I don't know what's going to happen come November.
Oh God, that's gonna be a shit show.
It's I thought I'd get myself a bowl of popcorn and a beer and just watch the entertainment because it's going to be nasty. And if Trump wins, I think he probably will. Wow.
Oh yeah. You thought the first election was bad with protests. Wait till you see this one. And I'll tell you what happened after Trump won in Portland. People went to what's called the Pearl District, which is basically the high end where the wealthier people live, basically northwest Portland. Really nice place. Well, it was at one point. They started smashing the fuck out of it because, oh, Trump won the election. Fuck you. Like, why are you smashing people's houses and businesses just because Trump won? Protest Trump, fine. I don't really give a shit. I really do not care. Like, I don't even like Trump. But it's like when you're smashing up communities because Trump won, that sounds like something a child would do. I didn't like what happened. I'm going to throw a temper tantrum. That's just so stupid. It's so gross.
I blame that. I blame that on two things. I blame that on the universities, and I blame that on the media, because the universities have infantilized students, and the media tells you half truths.
Yep.
I mean,
unfortunately,
the university has to be purged, as far as I'm concerned. It trains our youth to hate, to self-hate, and we come out of our universities thinking of things like rape culture, white supremacy. Everyone's a racist that's not a person of color. I mean, the list goes on. And I mean, you come out of school, you're young, you haven't really experienced life yet, and you're going to make a change. Like, what do you know about making a change? And you talk about, some of them I've actually heard say we want communism.
Oh God.
Have you not learned about what happened in Russia, Cambodia, Vietnam, China,
Venezuela too, right?
Hungary, and Germany? We tried it. Now, I wrote
You said Germany. What do you mean by Germany?
the West East Germany, before when the
Oh,
Berlin.
East Germany. Oh, okay, got it. I was thinking like Nazi Germany. They weren't communists, but no. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I
But they
forgot
were
about the Cold War.
fascists. We were socialistic fascists, if you will, if you want to put it
Yeah.
in term. And I mean, they argue about capitalism. Well, I agree that capitalism needs to be fixed. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah.
I do believe in capitalism as a form of economics with some socialist elements like we have in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want socialism out and out, or communism where the state controls and the state rules.
Yeah.
These young people have no idea what that really means. It sounds nice that they'll have everything given to them. Well, you don't necessarily have everything given to you like you think.
Yep. And there's also the other hand side of that coin, where it's like you are opening up the floodgates. It's like people saying like, oh, you allow gay marriage, then you're going to allow people to legalize pedophilia. Well, guess what? There are people who like NAMBLA and there are people who have actually endorsed sex with kids. They're called pro-contact people. And these people, or pro-life, or no, pro-choice, excuse me. Don't confuse it with the abortion debate. I spoke to Todd Nickerson today. He told me that pro-choice means pro-contact. Like children have a choice. They have right to consent. There are people who literally think that children can consent. It's not just, the outskirts of NAMBLA. There are people who literally believe that this should happen. And it's like, while it's a slippery slope argument, there's some truth to it. And I've seen evidence of it. And it's sad. And like you allow anything to happen, you have to consider it as a slippery slope argument. You have to consider. You can't just neglect it and be like, it's not going to happen because it's slippery slope, because that's ignorance. You give the government too much power, it will bite your hand. The government does not. It's like brands. It's like people who wear brand items and like, oh yeah, I love iPhones, or I love Apple, or I love Supreme, or I love Nike. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but like people are very particular about their Nike in Oregon. If you go to the Nike campus and you're wearing sneakers like that are Skechers, you will be tossed off campus probably, because they are Nike elitists. And I mean that in the smuggest, most elitist manner that you can probably think of right now. They are very elitist about, oh, what are you doing on here without Nikes? And it's like, bitch, I'm not rich. I can't afford Nikes. It's like, well, then you shouldn't be on campus. And it's like, it's what? It's like you're getting pissy over shoes. And these people don't realize that you give the government enough power, they're going to bite your hand. They don't care about you. Brands don't care about you. Businesses don't care about you. They don't care about the individuals. The government doesn't care about the individuals. Just look at the stimulus check. We still have not received a second stimulus check because no one can come to terms on anything. No one can just create a very sensible bill. Everyone has to be at everyone's throat. And I'm honestly just sick of it. Like, I just wish people could just talk. Like Nancy Pelosi recently apparently said that the Republicans or people on the right were quote unquote enemies of the state. You do not say that and expect them to work with you. That's just like that's antithetical to that.
Well, if you create a large bureaucracy, that bureaucracy has to be fed, and that takes tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're giving up your rights, if you will, to a socialist regime, then you're giving up your freedom, and you have no right to complain. It's like the Leviathan.
Yeah.
You give yourself up to some form of higher power, and because you've done that, you lose your right to complain. But
Are you talking about Thomas Hobbes' book?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I have that upstairs, actually. I have not gotten a chance to read it. I think it's because I saw it and I was like, God damn, that's a thick book. But it looks really good. And I've heard good things about it.
It's an interesting read. Now, people should also read, especially people who are anti-capitalist, should also read Adam Smith's book, the wealth of nations, and because he would not be happy with the capitalism of today, and
Mm-hmm.
he believed and he accepted the fact that there are those who will fall through the cracks, and that must be dealt with. He believed in a just working environment, fair exchange for a person's labor.
Mm.
But people only read sections of it, and very few of that.
Yeah.
And it's actually a very, very noteworthy book.
Interesting. Since I mentioned the Fascist Manifesto, tell me what you think about this, because this is what the Italian fascists supported. This is their tenets. Universal suffrage was lowered, voting age to 18 years, and voting for an electoral office eligibility for ages 25 and up. Proportional representation on a regular basis, voting for women, which was then opposed by the European nations. Representation at government level of newly created national councils by economic sector. The abolition of the Italian Senate. At the time, the Senate, as the upper house of parliament, was by process elected by the wealthier citizens, but there were really direct appointments by the king. It has been described as a sort of extended council of the crown. The formation of a national council of experts for labor and industry, and transportation, and for public health, for communication, etc. Sections to be made professionals or tradesmen with legislative powers, and elected. I can actually just share my screen. Why don't I just do that? But as you read the, I lost you, I think. Are you still there? Oh, okay. Where, I'll just do this. I'll do this. Okay. Share screen. Take a look at this and tell me, like, does this not look like it is something that the left would endorse today? A minimum wage, a quick enactment of law of the state and sanctions of an 8-hour workday for all workers, the participation of workers' representation in the function of industry commission to share the same confidence in the labor unions that prove to be technically morally worthy, as is given to industrial executives and public servants. Recognition of the railways and transport sector, revision of the draft law of invalidity insurance, reduction of the retirement age from 65 to 55 in military affairs. The manifesto advocated for the creation of a short service national militia with specifically defensive responsibilities. This is just like so much of what the left would endorse, and it's like they want to talk about fascism. If anything, the left is more fascistic than the right. And they call Donald Trump a fascist. It's like, Trump is not a fascist. Like, I don't like Trump as much as the next person, but he's not a fascist. And I hate that they always have to call him a fascist. It's like they called Kyle Rittenhouse a white nationalist. How's he a white nationalist? Well, he's with a white nationalist group. Can you prove that he himself is a white nationalist? Well, no.
Understand, Autumn, that in a movement, people create a language, and
yeah, that's true.
And they have done that, and in that language, they have changed meanings to suit their calling. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, I don't. Well, I'm being a Canadian. I don't like Trump or dislike the man.
Mm-hmm.
But mind you, when you guys were going through your elections with both he and Hillary, I thought you had the choice of dying or dying, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it really was. And that's what it is now. I mean, we have Kamala Harris as the vice president pick, and everyone's like, this is a national, historic, monumental move by Joe Biden to include the first person of color. Sometimes they say black, even though she's Jamaican and Indian. Even if she is black, who cares? Like, who cares if she's black or not?
Person of color. It's all part of the politics.
Yeah, that's what's disgusting as a journalist, like that I'm seeing my fellow journalists, so-called journalists, doing this. And it's like, who cares if she's black? Well, we got to report the news. That's the news. It's a historical precedent. It's like precedent. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, you don't, like, if I was running for mayor, if I was still running for mayor for Portland and I won, I would be pissed off if people were like, the first transgender mayor of Portland to sit in office, whenever, January 1st, 2021, I would be mad. It's like, don't use my transness. First of all, don't even out me as trans. Second of all, don't even use my transness as an indicator of progressiveness. Like, I don't care. I was elected because I would hope people agreed with my stance, not because I was trans.
Part of the language is things like equality and equity, and they want 50-50 as much as possible. And that to me, I believe in the right to equal rights to people to attempt and try for anything they wish to try for. I totally support that.
I agree.
But for the equity part of it, where it's 50-50, no, I don't support that. You choose the best, and you try your best to make it as close to 50-50 margin. But you know what? That's pie in the sky fantasy.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't want to keep you up too long, so do you want to go ahead and end it and see how this does on YouTube?
Sure. Well, I just think that I worry about what's happening in the United States, because what happens to you guys eventually happens across the board, and
it'll become a domino effect.
It just concerns me that it's almost surreal how we're watching the country burn, and everybody's going about their business like there's nothing happening. So, excuse me. It's like okay, they're over there. Let them fight it out. There's nothing we can do. We'll just let it burn itself out. And I don't think it's going to burn itself out.
Yeah, it's not. These people they've been going on these tirades and these protests since just before Trump was elected, and it's like, give it a rest. First of all, you're not fighting a revolution, so fuck off. That's like insulting to every revolution before you that actually was a good revolution. Then they'll say like, oh yeah, it's the French Revolution. It's like the French Revolution was not good. It was a sanguinary event, and it was shrouded in just lies and deceit, just like the Vietnam War. Thomas Paine was thrown in prison and tried to be executed because he was the only one who said we should not kill King Louis. Everyone else, Robespierre, George Washington, everyone else agreed that he should be executed, and he was executed. And that just makes them as bad. If these people have protested, they have advocated for the death of Trump. They have a person dressed up as Trump in D.C., and he's has a guillotine over his neck. And it's like, why are you supporting this? This is not okay. Like, if you want to fight a revolution, fight something that's truly honorable. It's like people saying like, it's just, I don't know. I'm just flabbergasted by the way people act. And it's like, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I know I'm not. I make a lot of stupid decisions. I'm not a perfect journalist, but at least I try. You have to try.
Like I said, in revolution, they tend to collapse, and with the intersectionality, they're going to turn on each other. And like the revolution, you saw Marat, Danton, Robespierre, Saint-Just, all of them reached a violent end.
Yeah,
and the revolution failed.
I remember learning about the French Revolution at university, and I was just disgusted by how bloody and horrible it was. It's just Amazon. It's not a good thing, and it's not something to praise. And people are like, "Well, we got freedom." It's like wasn't there like 2 or 3 revolutions in France? Like, it was not the Robespierre Revolution that changed everything. It probably made a positive impact by showing how dirty and disgusting of a revolution it really was.
It started with the July Rebellion when it's considered when they burned down the prison, and then they marched to oh god, what's the name of the city? Oh dear, it's right in the tip of my.
I think Versailles. I know what you're talking about, but
they went to Versailles and demanded bread from the king, and that it just sort of escalated from there. I mean, at that time, King Louis could have saved his neck, but anyway.
Yeah, well, kings were pretty stupid back then. They were on power-hungry trips. So, but yeah, I don't want to keep you up too long, so I'm going to go ahead and end it for you. All right?
Okay, they're very good. I'll see you again.
All right, 1 second.